G'day and welcome to Doesn't Matter once again. Today I want to talk about visiting other clubs. If you're already training in a club and you want to check out some other clubs, you want to do a bit of club hopping, there's not only nothing wrong with that, it's actually a really good idea, at least occasionally, to go and check out another club, see what they're doing, see how they train. Be specific. Try and pick a sparring class or a class where there's likely to be a fair bit of sparring. Go to a combat orientated school if you're trying to pick up combat style or technique, or see what the local industry standard is if you've moved to that area and you want to sort of see where you fit in. If you feel there's a weakness in your style or even in your school, it's worth having a look elsewhere at what strengths and weaknesses you can find elsewhere and explore those options. There isn't any lucre in remaining so rigidly loyal to your own club that you can't find any benefit elsewhere. There's always benefit to be had. I encourage my students at Toe to Toe Martial Arts to visit other clubs. I encourage it on a regular basis. Some of them don't, some of them do, some of them do it occasionally, some of them will try and get 2, 3, 4 sparring sessions in particular. A lot of them compete, so they want to do that, and I encourage it. I always did it, much to the chagrin of many of my instructors who are often of a more traditional bent and didn't really look on that as a sign of loyalty. My idea of loyalty is that they come back. If your students are loyal, they come back. If they're loyal, their first allegiance will be to the club that nurtured them, that gave them the space to grow. And if they don't come back, it's because they found a new home and that's where they should be. The whole idea that you can command that kind of thing is ludicrous. You can't command loyalty, you can inspire it. And you're not always, as a club owner and a coach, you're not always the best person for everyone. Some other people that will come into your club will find a home elsewhere. They'll find a coach, a mentor, a friend elsewhere that is better suited to them than you are. I think that's a healthy way of looking at things. Que sera, what will be. Best not to hang on too tightly. Attachment is always a problem for us human beings, and it's a good way of practicing that healthy letting go. So I encourage my students out. I've lost very few as a result, but yeah, I've lost a couple. I've lost 3 or 4 very good students to other clubs because that was where they were meant to be. So encourage your students to go out, encourage yourself to go out and explore. The world is there to be explored. It's your oyster, so find out what it is that is waiting for you. And it's particularly handy to see how other people do the same things, not just that they're doing different things or you find something novel or unique that you haven't trained in before, but just watching. Often it's much more useful when you're looking at things that you've done, that you know inside and out, that you've repeated it thousands, hundreds of thousands of times even. And these people are doing the same thing, but they're doing it a little different. There are variations, there are distinctiveness to the way they do it, and there are often reasons why, and exploring those reasons why will enrich your experience. Doesn't mean necessarily that you'll swap over to the way they're doing things, but you may find that there's some benefit in the way they do things in certain contexts, in certain circumstances, and that's just another tool in your toolkit. Even if it's not something that you'll ever use, it's a mirror, it's another perspective on what you're doing. So even if you go, well, that was really interesting, I enjoyed spending a couple of hours doing it that way, but I prefer my way for good reasons. Sometimes there's a digestion process that goes on when you introduce to new ideas, and it can take days, months, weeks, years. And one day you'll be rolling, or you'll be sparring, you'll be training, you'll be shadow sparring, you'll be meditating, whatever it is, and suddenly, bang, that thing that you didn't think was that useful, that was, you know, a B option for you compared to A, suddenly you see where that would fit, or suddenly that gives you an insight into another technique or another way of doing things or another methodology or another approach in your coaching, possibly, as well as your training and your fighting, that blurs that distinction that you previously made, and all of a sudden you see new value in it. You see a way that you hadn't seen before, and these things take time. So in getting that kind of cross stimulus is really good. Now, I've raved on enough about that and the reasons why we visit other clubs and we check out other ways of doing things and methodologies. But I think one of the first things you do when you go into the club is try and watch a class if you can. Watch some of the class, watch how they do things. It's always handy to familiarise yourself with their protocols, any of the rituals or ceremony that they go through, so that you can be respectful to the way they conduct themselves. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. So that's always a really good thing to do. Watch how they treat each other. Watch how the coach relates to the students and vice versa, how they relate to each other. Really handy to see how they treat beginners. So if there are beginners that are clearly very new, especially if they're first timers, they've rocked up with you, you've sat down to have a look, you've introduced yourself, you've said hello, which you should always do, and you've sat down to have a bit of a squiz. Watch how they treat other people. Now, if you don't have the luxury or you don't feel like sitting and watching, and you're warming up with them while paying attention to what you're being told and following your instructions carefully, again, keep an eye out, open the bandwidth, and take note of how they treat each other. Take note of how they might be treating beginners and novices there. See if they're given time. See if they're given different things to do. If they're thrown in the deep end. Now, I've trained in very good clubs which threw everyone in the deep end. In JKD it's common, everyone does almost the same things together, and it's not a bad way of doing things sometimes. I prefer to give beginners and new people very slimmed down, simple versions of what I'm giving everyone else, and I prefer to give fighters at least at some stage in the class, their own stuff to do as well. I feel that there are points in the class where you want to look for those points and see, do they variegate, do they differentiate? They'll let you know if it's a safe place to be, do they relate to each other in a healthy way, are they respectful of one another, do they treat beginners like cannon fodder and beat them up, or do they ignore them completely? What's the culture there? You can get a lot from those basic observations. Reciprocity. I think, is there a mutual respect that seems to go on there for everyone concerned? We're all engaging in the same activity. There should be. It isn't always the case. If there's a deep hierarchy and there's fighters, coaches, seniors at the top, and then everyone else is sort of, the Übermensch down the bottom, the Untermensch down the bottom, sorry, then that's going to produce a particular kind of culture. I've trained in plenty of clubs like that. They weren't my favourite places to train. I got a lot out of them because there were some very good people there, but never felt at home. I'm a people person, and I'm an egalitarian, and I like to treat people well. And I don't think just because I can beat you up that means I'm better than you, because I'm not. It doesn't mean that a senior shouldn't be respected by their novices and new students, but at the same time the respect has to go both ways, reciprocity once again. When you go to a club, put your white belt on, do as you're told, follow all the instructions, follow the rituals, the ceremonies. If you don't know them, follow as best as you can. Be the kind of student, the kind of visitor that you would like to have in your club, okay? Mirror that kind of behaviour. It is risky to visit other clubs, and so being respectful, being observant, and being respectful will avoid a lot of conflict. Being observant will let you know when you need to pull a hammy, and I don't advocate that lightly, but if you're in a situation where you feel the training isn't particularly safe, or you're just having a horrible time, it's just not you. You should leave. You can make whatever excuse you want. I just made a habit of just leaving. I just say, listen, I've got to go. I'm really sorry, I apologise, bow out, leave. What they think is up to them. If you find that a little confronting, plead sick, pull a hammy. It's a white lie. I don't like lying, so I will generally just say, I need to leave, I'm sorry, I really have to go, thank you very much, blah blah blah. But that's not for everyone. You say what you need to say to get out of there peacefully and calmly. There are places that are not good, and you don't always realise it till you're in the middle of the class and you realise this is not a place for me. You shouldn't stay there and endure it if you really don't want to. If you think you're safe and it just sucks, put up with it, do the class, gut it out, it's fine. You say you're bored, or you don't like the people, but you're not in any danger. If you do feel in danger though, you feel it's dangerous training, they're doing crazy things, they're doing anachronistic or obsolete things, super old school, or just people who don't know what they're doing, which is often the case, especially conditioning classes and things like that. Yeah, you should leave, you should get the hell out of there. You can be really badly injured if they're sparring full power and knocking each other out. Yeah, it's probably a good time to leave too. It's risky, it's dangerous visiting other clubs. It's also incredibly rewarding, and you've got to balance those two things up. It's worth looking, if you can, at how people spar.